In today's video, we'll review the Performance Pro import template. This is a file that you're going to build out and send to your implementation specialist. For the next few minutes, we'll discuss each column to help you prepare your file. So starting first with column A, this is wanting a unique username for each of your employees within Performance Pro. We typically recommend an email address as the username, preferably a work email address. There are other alternatives as described below, but this is something that, again, would need to be unique to all employees. Column B is looking for the employee ID number. So if you're pulling this information from an HRIS platform, that would be something that each employee typically would have assigned to them as a unique employee ID number. So that's what you would enter for each person in column B. There is a password requirement for everyone's first initial use within Performance Pro. So we give you some examples below, but one of the most common things to do is to assign everyone the same password. The example below is welcome123. So that would be something where when the employee logs in for the first time, it'll prompt them to change the password. That's why it's okay to keep it the same for all users. The next few columns are pretty simple. First name, middle name, last name. So again, that would be something that you'd pull directly from your HRIS platform, enter in for each employee. Column G is looking for the email address. So if you do end up using the email address as the username as well, those values would mirror. So email address would preferably be the work email. That way your employees can receive alert notifications from the platform. Column H is for hire date. This can either be the hire date, or if you use a rehire date, you could use either of those two options. Let me move the file down a little bit. Column I is what's called access level. For the most part, you're going to have two forms of access level. You're going to have the employee access level and the admin access level. For anybody that's going to be a full system administrator, which is typically the HR team, you would give yourself a 2. That would give you full viewing capabilities within Performance Pro. Otherwise, everybody else is going to be grouped into the employee access level, which is a 1. So even if you have employees and managers, they're still going to be grouped together in the employee access level. Column J is the advanced analytics access, which is a secondary reporting tool that allows you to give access to your full admins, or in some cases, your appraisers. So depending on what access level you want to roll out, you just go through these options below. Column K wants to know who within your organization is an appraiser or a supervisor or manager, whichever terminology you prefer. But essentially, that would be the person that has direct reports assigned to them that they would complete appraisals for. So anybody that's going to be a full appraiser in Performance Pro would need a value of a 1. Otherwise, they can be left blank if they are not a manager or an appraiser. Column L is looking for the position or the job title for each employee. So this is something, again, if we're pulling this directly from the HRIS platform, we recommend taking it character for character, not necessarily abbreviations of the position title, but the full position or job title. The next couple columns are referring to the appraiser assignment to each employee. So I'm going to expand this to show each option, but we essentially need to know who is going to be the manager for each employee within Performance Pro. So it starts with column M and column N go hand in hand together. So what column M is wanting to know is who is the manager, but what is that manager's username value? So again, if you're using the email address as the username for all your users, column M would need the email address of the appraiser for that particular employee in this row. Again, column N goes hand in hand with column M. If you would prefer to use the employee ID number of the manager that's assigned or appraiser, you could use that instead of column M. Most clients will have one primary appraiser assigned to each employee. So if that is the case, then for column O, the appraiser one's weight would just be set to 100%. But if there are instances where two primary appraisers need to evaluate one employee, we do have a shared appraiser feature. So that would be for columns P, Q, and R. If you do have an instance where you have a shared appraiser where one employee needs to report to two appraisers evenly, then you would utilize these columns. We're next going to move to the appraisal dates within Performance Pro. So we have a few different options here, but what we're looking for initially is to know whether or not your appraisals are going to be based on the employee's anniversary date or date of hire, or if it's going to be something that's more so company-wide. So if everybody within your organization is going to be based on their anniversary date, for column S, you would give everybody a 1 to signify that. But if it's not going to be employee anniversary, maybe it's based on a calendar year or fiscal year, then everybody would be a 2 for company-wide. The next column, column T, would like to know the frequency in which you complete appraisals. A lot of clients typically will use an annual appraisal. So when we reference an annual appraisal, that is the number 4. So for everybody in each row, you would give a 4. But if it is something where you complete semi-annual or something of the frequency below, you would just make sure to use that numeric value accordingly. Column U would like to know the appraisal start date. So if we go with the example where everybody uses a calendar year, if we think about 2023, your appraisal start date would be January 1st, 2023. And then your appraisal end date would be December 31st, 2023. That's the full calendar year that you would be appraising. The due date field is something that can be extended past the end date. So again, if we go with the example of a calendar year from January to December, maybe you allow extra time for your appraisals to be completed. So the due date can push past the end date. An example would be January 31st of 2024, if it's for a 2023 calendar year appraisal. That is perfectly fine for the due date column. If your employees are going to complete self-appraisals, you can assign a self-appraisal due date to be typically before the appraisal end date. So if your staff is completing appraisals towards the end of December, maybe the employee's self portion needs to be completed by either the end of November or possibly the beginning of December. That's what we would recommend for the self-appraisal due date, is to be a little bit before when it's actually the end date. Performance Pro does have 3 areas of content or buckets of content that you can utilize between goals, factors, and core values. So between the 3 sections, each can hold a specific amount of weight that would factor into the overall appraisal score. It truly depends on which content bucket you're going to use, but for these examples here, if you're using all 3, they're going to total up to 100% cumulatively. So if we think about this, goal weights, if you want this to be higher and you set at 50%, that means between your factors, which are also known as competencies, and your core values, that means there's 50% remaining weight value. So you could say this one's 25% and this one's 25%. Or you could say for factors or competencies, I want 40%, and then for core values, I want 10%. As long as all 3 sections internally total 100%, that's what we're looking for weighting value. But this is something that you can discuss with your assigned implementation specialist as well. The next 3 columns, AB, AC, AD, are what we call company units. So the company units in Performance Pro are department, division, and location. These are also something that can be typically exported from your HRIS platform. Most employees will have a department and at least a location. So those are 2 fields that you can add in directly. The other option, again, is what we call division. But this could be used as a field for reporting purposes. If there's an additional field within your platform outside of department and location that you would use for reporting purposes in Performance Pro, you could simply place that information in column AC for division. Past column AD, all of the remaining fields are not required. They are optional. Most of them do pertain to salary information, or if you are wanting to use the merit matrix model within Performance Pro, there are fields and columns for that as well. But these are additional fields that can be added in outside of the initial implementation. So if you wanted to add that information in at a later date, you absolutely can. But these are just additional fields that, again, you could ask your implementation specialist about whether or not you need to include these in the initial upload. So as I mentioned, some pertain to salary information, such as the pay amount, the pay status, which is really wanting to know if they're full-time or part-time, their pay basis, which is whether they're hourly or salary. Again, maybe you use non-exempt or exempt. The pay frequency, which needs to know, are they getting paid weekly, biweekly, monthly, things of that nature. How many hours they're working weekly. This is typically an average. Whether or not full-time employees work 38 hours or 40 hours, whatever the average hours are, is what you'd want to put for that. And then, as I mentioned, further down the road is an area for the merit matrix model within Performance Pro. So this is wanting to know your pay grade min, mid, and max information. Hopefully this information was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, you can definitely contact your implementation specialist.